Hello everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here, and in this battle report, my O12 take on PanO. So in this game, we are playing Frontline, but we're playing it with CodeOne rules. So basically, everything is CodeOne. We've got 10 order limits, we've got all the rules in play, but we're taking the old N3 ITS season Frontline game, which means that the map has a central scoring zone. There's also a scoring zone closer to my deployment, and there's a scoring zone closer to the enemy deployment. So these three scoring zones work as such. If you have more points in the nearest zone at the end of the game, then you get 1 bonus point. If you have more points, as in more points in terms of units, in the central zone than your opponent, then you get 3 points. And if you have more points than your opponent in the farthest zone, then you get 4 points. We're also playing this with a classified. So we're drawing 4 classified objective cards and you get to keep 1. And there's an HVT on the table. Now the reason we're doing this is because there's a tournament in New Zealand in October and I needed a little bit of practice in playing to different objectives that aren't the ones in the CodeOne missions. So, in terms of the whip roll, it goes like this. I get a 6, which is successful, and he gets a 16, which is slightly too high. So I win, I choose turn order and choose to go first. So he chooses deployment sides and deployment order. I go there and he goes there. He chooses to let me deploy first. Then in terms of my deployment, I have my Gamma Lieutenant at the back, which you can see there with the total reaction Copperbot being played by a Sirius Dog right there. Check the map for placement if you're keen to see how this looks in relation to the rest of the game. I then have my Omega chilling at the back. On top of the building, I have my multi-sniper Epsilon with MSV2. As we swing round, the model that you'll see on the balcony is actually a Hacker's Land model that I accidentally received in Wildfire, but that is my Crusher with forward deployment. On the left-hand side, I have Hippolyta just sitting out there. And then on the roof of that building, as we pan up, you can see that there is a Gangbuster there. I then have my high value targets on my HVT in the middle of the table, enjoying the birds in the trees. So then when we look at his deployment, on the far left hand side he has a -6 camo token in the building. He then has Liang Kai towards the back. In the hangar he has an Aguila. He has a Knight of Justice next to that with a Spitfire. He then has an Infirmera. He then has a TR-HMG, then he has a token with Mimetism -6, then he's got his HVT over there, then there's another -6 Mimetism camo token. I'm already quite scared of this list because there's so much -6 Mimetism, which is scary. I then deploy my held back model, which is a second multi-sniper Epsilon. His held back model is a camo token with Mimetism -6. So let's get into turns. It's turn 1, my turn, and I am starting with 9 orders. My first decision is to activate the Epsilon, and I choose to idle. The total reaction HMG is in line of sight. He decides to shoot as his ARO at a -9, which means he'll basically be hitting on 2s. For my second short skill, I decide to shoot at the total reaction bot, unsurprisingly, and I'm on straights, so the odds are very much in my favour. Sadly, as a resolution, everything misses, nothing happens. So, for my second order, I choose to do that again. First short skill I choose to idle, he chooses to shoot back again, and I choose to shoot him. I hit him twice. He misses completely. He fails 1 save, and so the total reaction HMG goes unconscious. For my third order, I activate the Gangbuster and decide to move. I face no AROs, so for my second short skill, the Gangbuster moves. For my fourth order, I also activate the Gangbuster again for the first short skill. He does a little prone crawl, faces no AROs, and second short skill decides to crawl into what I hope is the farthest zone to try and contest that. Fifth order, my first short skill, I decide to stand up my camo token, which to you and I is my razor, and move forward a bit. In terms of AROs, the camo token that's in the hangar chooses to do nothing, even though I'm in its zone of control, and Liang Kai, because I'm also in its zone of control, decides to dodge. So for my second short skill, I decide to move again. Liang Kai dodges, he's successful and decides to move 3 inches to bring the razor into the razor's token into line of sight, because he gets the 2-inch that's standard and then +1 for his special ability. So now Liang Kai can see through the door, which is a little bit annoying. For my sixth order, I activate the token again, and for my first short skill I decide to move. In terms of ARO, both of them decide to delay, which is obviously eligible against a camo token. And then as my second short skill, I choose to lay a mine, which reveals the razor. Okay, so the important thing to remember here is that the mine doesn't lay until the end of the order. So the AROs from Liang Kai and the camo token after my second short skill have been announced are that Liang Kai is going to use the chain rifle to shoot, and the camo token is going to hack using carbonite, which reveals that to be a croc man. So again, just the point around the mine, if the razor dies in this conflict, then the mine would still be laid because it resolves at the end. So what I'm facing here is normal rolls, because my mine, it doesn't deliver a face-to-face roll in any way. So we do the crocman hacker first, as that might be better for my opponent and is attacking with carbonite. So he is successful with a 9, and I save with a 19, thanks to my BTS as well. So carbonite fails. Now we realise slightly later that carbonite is DA, so I need to do a second save, and luckily save that second one as well. Then I need to do an armor save versus the chain rifle, because it auto hits. It's damage 13 and I save on a 15. So I got away with that pretty much. Then in terms of my 7th order, I activate the razor again. For my first short skill, I choose to idle. In terms of the AROs, Liang Kai decides to dodge, and the croc hacker decides to hack carbonite again. For the razor's second short skill, he decides to hack crocman. He also decides to split fire with Liang Kai, but then we realise a few actions later that Liang Kai cannot be targeted with a hack. Luckily, none of this actually impacts that. So what you're about to see is a mistake, but it doesn't impact the overall outcomes. With the hack-to-hack between split fire with obviously the razor going for crocman and Liang Kai, and then crocman going back to the razor. So the croc makes his save, and then Liang Kai saves his, so the mistake didn't end up mattering. Then Liang Kai does his dodge. Here we make another really big mistake, kind of the same level of mistake that PanO is in general. In N3, dodges triggered mines and were a really solid tactic for clearing them. Now in CodeOne, dodges don't trigger mines, but as kind of a hangover from N3, we play this very wrong, and we continue to do so for the rest of the game. So we didn't realise this until after the game. So unfortunately, this mistake is what you will see next. So the mine shouldn't have been cleared by Liang Kai dodging, which is what you're seeing happen right now. It should remain there, and Liang Kai's dodge, it still enables him to move and everything else. So apologies for that, and good on you if you've picked up that mistake. But if you're watching this to learn, remember, dodges do not trigger mines. 8th order. So I activate the razor again. For my first short skill, choose to idle. And the AROs are kind of the same. The crocman decides to carbonite, and Liang Kai decides to reset. Again, Liang Kai isn't a valid target for this hack, but we didn't realize until after this. So he didn't need to reset, and in fact should have dodged and would have dodged if we'd have realized that. So for my second short skill with the Razor, I decided to do a full Carbonite hack on Crocman and ignore Liang Kai. As the resolution, Crocman rolls a 5 and the Razor rolls a 16 and a 7, and the 7 obviously beats the 5 and goes through. So I've won the hack face-to-face rolls. He now has to make 2 saving throws because Carbonite has DA. He's looking for 14 plus because it's 13 damage on BTS, and the Crocman doesn't have any BTS saves. Luckily, both of those attacks for me go through because the Crocman does not roll the 14 plus. So Crocman goes into an immobilized B state, which is a good resolution for me. It's at this point that we realize that Liang Kai couldn't be the target for the hacks. In terms of my 9th order, I activate the Razor again, and for my first short skill, I decide to move up out of line of sight of Liang Kai. In terms of the ARO, the Crocman still gets a reset because it's still happening within his zone of control, and tries to get out of the immobilized B state while suffering a -6 penalty. Then Liang Kai decides to dodge, because now we've realized that reset isn't a valid thing. So for my second short skill, I decide to lay the mine. The Crocman tries a reset at -6, but fails. Liang Kai dodges, is successful, and chooses to move 3. Now again, remember the mine isn't laid until the end of the turn, so even though that was a successful dodge and we've been playing it wrong up until this point, it's because the dodge is happening before the mine is laid. And that is the end of my turn. In general, I think everything's gone pretty well. I'm very happy with the outcome here. I like the fact that the Crocman hack is in an immobilized state. That's slightly annoying because he's still going to contribute orders and is still going to count towards points at the end. So ideally don't want that to stay there. Disappointed that Liang Kai is still in place, but at least there's a mine to stop him from hopefully coming through that door. And very glad that I took the total reaction bot, so I have stripped 1 order from his order pool. So for the PanO turn, the first order activates Liang Kai. For the first short skill, decides to move up. In terms of the ARO, the Razor, realizing that he's in a bit of an imperative state and is basically facing certain death, decides to do a data scan to complete my hidden objective. The Razor's mine goes off at the same time, thanks to Liang Kai moving in its zone of control and within line of fire. So Liang Kai, the second short skill is a CC attack. So I succeed with my whip to data scan, which is fantastic, and complete my objective, but obviously now his attack is going unopposed. His CC attack is a 12 plus his 6, so it's an 18. So the only good thing to come out of that is that it's not a crit, which is very easy to do when you're against a model with a CC attribute such as his. So I have 2 saves to make, thanks to the DA type of his weapon. My target is a 17 plus because he is doing 16 damage, thanks to his martial arts level adding 3. I roll 2 12s, which is too low. The Razor is very much dead. Now the mine goes off, obviously, and so Liang Kai has to make a save against that. The damage of the mine is 13, so he needs a 14 plus. He rolls a 13, has armor 1, which takes him up to 14, so he survives the mine going off in his face. For his second order, he activates Liang Kai again. For his first short skill, he decides to move up. AROs, there are none, so for his second short skill, he decides to move again. That second move brings him into zone of control of the Crusher, which grants the Crusher an ARO. The Crusher decides to dodge, because that's all that he can do. He has a PH 12, suffers a -3 because he is reacting to an ARO that is happening outside of his line of sight, and which means my target is 9 or below. I roll a 10, which is a fail. Third order activates Liang Kai again. First short skill, he decides to move up a little bit more. So in terms of AROs, the Crusher obviously gets another one, and he decides to dodge. And now the Gamma does, because he's gone into his zone of control. And the Gamma decides to do a dodge. For the second short skill, Liang Kai moves again. Now, this is safe because the Gamma isn't facing Liang Kai, so he knows that there's not going to be a shot happening here. So the Gamma does a successful dodge, decides to turn and move 2 inches to try and get slightly farther away from Liang Kai's oncoming attack, And then the Crusher's dodge is also successful. He does a change facing to face the ladder. Fourth order activates the camo token that you can see there. First short skill decides to stand and move. He faces an ARO from the Gangbuster, who doesn't have line of sight, so decides to do a dodge at the -3. There's the Peeler, who decides to do a discover, and the Gamma can also see this camo token, who also decides to do a discover. Now, both the Peeler and the Gamma suffer -6 for the mimetism that the camo token has against their discover rolls, and also -3 for the discover range against their whips, which is going to be very difficult for them to get. For the second short skill, the camo token decides to do a move. Very confident that we're not going to be passing those discover rolls. So the Gangbuster's dodge fails on an 18, obviously not helped by the -3, but that is a high roll anyway. And then both of the discovers, now because the Peeler and Gamma have equal whip, I just rolled them at the same time, both of those fail as expected. For the fifth order, activates the camo token again. For his first short skill, decides to move up. The ARO is Hippolyta, who chooses to dodge. Now, he's obviously suffering the -3 due to that being out of line of sight. The second short skill reveals a Crocman and drops a camo token, which we obviously know is a mine. Now, Hippolyta's dodge is on a -3 because it is out of line of sight. I roll a 20, so the dodge fails. For his sixth order, he activates the Crocman and decides to use a long skill to re-camo. Now, the mine has line of sight on Hippolyta, and the ARO that Hippolyta chooses is to dodge. Now, we were still playing under the misconception that ARO dodges trigger mines. Now, we now know that that is not the case after the game, but unfortunately what you're about to see is obviously incorrect. And actually, strategically, with that knowledge, I would have been better not moving Hippo, but I kind of knew I was going to be facing that mine then in my active turn, which would definitely trigger it. So if you're playing CodeOne properly, would it be safe to dodge a mine as an ARO, not safe to move in front of a mine in your active turn. So Hippo's whip is 14. I rolled a 12, so it's a success. But for some reason, I have a brain fart and apply the -3 for dodging out of line of sight. Having just done that for the Crocman, I think it's buried in my brain. So we move on as though Hippolyta has taken the hit from the mine. So Hippo's armor save is too low, so she's unconscious at this stage. Now, even though none of this should have happened, I've ended up with an unconscious Hippolyta, but that is just learning the new rules and being slightly rusty. But just disregard that if you're trying to learn CodeOne. The ARO should not have triggered the mine, and even if it had, I should not have suffered the -3 for dodging with it in my line of sight. The mine is cleared though, so that is positive. Then he uses his special secret side order to parachute walk in an Akal Commando with Spitfire. I think I pronounced that correctly. Obviously, he wanted to clear Hippolyta so that was possible. With his seventh order, he activates the Akal. With his first short skill, he decides to move up slightly. Faces an ARO from the Epsilon, who decides to shoot. With his second short skill, he decides to shoot his Spitfire at the Epsilon. He's on straights with 4 dice. I am on 16s, luckily, because I get +3 for Ranger MSV or something similar, but I'm on +3. So he rolls 2 14s. My 8 is a success. So I beat him, which is fantastic. And because it's DA ammo, he has to make 2 saves. He saves none of them, so the Akal dies to an ARO, which is the best way to kill a model, in my opinion. 8th order. He activates Liang Kai. With his first short skill, decides to move up. Faces an ARO from the Gamma, who declares that he's going to shoot. And also faces an ARO from the Epsilon, but decides to not do anything. So it's actually only facing a proper ARO from the Gamma. The Gamma is on straights. And for his second short skill, he decides to shoot his shotgun at the Gamma. My 11 luckily beats his. with my heavy pistol, but he makes his armor saves, so nothing really happens. And that is the end of his turn and the end of round 1. I'm reasonably happy with how things have gone. I think my Razor was always doomed, and obviously we played both mine interactions incorrectly, and things could have gone in my favour slightly more if we hadn't cleared my Razor's mine with the Yankai, but then, to be honest, I laid a second one, and that still didn't kill the Yankai, so I think that's just destined to beat mines all the time. And then obviously I might not necessarily be starting this turn with Hippolyta dead if we'd have played the mine interaction correctly. Either way, either not applying the -3 or by not letting my ARO trigger that mine. Anyway, round 2, it's turn 1, which is O12. So I use my special order to bring in the Delta Doctor and the Yudbot. They both decide to walk in from the table edge. There is an ARO from the server bot who has line of sight, who decides to dodge. Passes. With my first regular order, I activate the Delta Doctor. With my first short skill, I decide to move up. Faces an ARO from, again, that servant bot, who chooses to dodge. And then with my second short skill, he decides to shotgun shoot at the Crocman, who is immobilized in the building. The Yudbot during all of this just moves 6 inches up. So the Crocman is able to do an ARO, but can only do a reset at -6. So he rolls a 7, so equals 13, and his whip is 13. So he has a crit success, which means he's no longer immobilized. And the servant decides to does his dodge roll and passes. The Delta still shoots the Croc on straights, because I'm using the hit mode with the template. So obviously just straight hits. At damage 14, the Crocman fails his saves, so he goes unconscious. So even though he came out of immobilized, had he have survived, he would have been fine, but luckily I killed him, which was good. So now, luckily, it doesn't generate orders and doesn't generate points. So that is definitely the outcome I needed from that. Second order, I activate the Delta Doctor again. My first short skill, I choose to move. Generates an ARO from the Aguila in the building, who chooses to dodge, and also the servant, who chooses to dodge. The Yudbot peripheral moves 6 inches into base-to-base contact with Hippolyta. That generates an ARO from the camo token, but the camo token, which we know to be the Croc mine layer dude, decides to do nothing. So then with the second short skill, I decide to use the peripheral to heal Hippo, which is successful. The servant dodge fails, so it doesn't go anywhere, and then the Aguila in the building dodges, passes, but doesn't move very far. Then on my third order, the Delta Doctor uses first short skill to move up. Generates an ARO from the servant again, who chooses to dodge, and also the Aguila in the building, who also chooses to dodge, and the Yudbot decides to move up slightly more. With the second short skill, the Delta Doctor aims to shoot at the servant using the template. The servant dodges, the Aguila is successful in dodging and decides to move a little bit. So unfortunately, no successful resolution there, for me at least. Fourth order, decide to activate Hippolyta. With the first short skill, decide to move up. She faces no AROs, so for my second short skill, move up even further. With my fifth order, activate the Delta Doctor again. For my first short skill, decide to move. ARO attracts from the servant, who chooses to dodge again, and then for the second short skill, I decide to shoot, but using the non-template version, because that has been enabling him to dodge very well, which has been annoying. So I get +3, a 5 and a 5, fails his, gets a 13 for him. Both are, for me, are a good success, and he fails his save, and the servant is gone. That was nice to focus on, but didn't make a huge difference because the servants don't generate orders, but they do count a little bit for points when you're calculating. So that was a bit of a distraction, I think. And then for my sixth order, I decide to activate the Delta Doctor again. With my first short skill, decide to move up. Generates an ARO from the Aguila, who chooses to dodge. And for my second short skill, it's straights for me, blast mode, aiming to hit the Doctor Bot, which I mistakenly claimed to be a camo token during the deployment phase of this video. So unfortunately, that is just a Doctor thingy. I use the blast mode, so it's straights for me. I get 1 hit, and he fails his dodge. He fails his save. And so his little doctor dude goes unconscious, which is a good result for me. Then for my 7th order, I activate the Gamma. With my first short skill, I decide to move a little bit. Generates an ARO from Liang Kai, who decides to dodge. And then with my second short skill, I decide to use the heavy pistol to shoot at Liang Kai. Thanks to my +1 burst, I think that he dodges, which is not ideal, because that's successful. So then I use my Lieutenant order on my Gamma. With my first short skill, I choose to idle. Liang Kai chooses to dodge again, because that was successful, so why not? I'm -3 now because Liang Kai now has cover, but I need to try and shoot to get rid of him. I luckily get 2 hits, he fails his saves and dies. So it took me an extra order than I wanted, but managed to get the outcome that I was after. That is the end of my turn. So going into PanO turn in round 2. He first spends his Lieutenant order on the... It activates the Knight of Justice. On his first short skill, moves, gets line of sight to Hippolyta, and then moves back again. The ARO from Hippo is a dodge. He shoots, and then factoring in range and her Mimetism -6, he's on -9, looking for 5s. My dodge is successful. I dodge 4 inches thanks to dodging the standard normal 2, and then her special ability to dodge an extra 2 inches. Then for his first regular order, but his second total order, for his first short skill, he activates the Knight of Justice again. The ARO is Hippolyta, who chooses to dodge for a second time. For his second short skill, he chooses to shoot at Hippo. And as you can see in his dice roll, he knocks my dodge roll. And as a result, he hits me twice with a 2 and a 3. His weapon is damage 14 and DA. I am very lucky though that I save both thanks to my armor 3. For his second regular order, he activates Knight of Justice again, uses his first short skill to move around. The ARO comes from the Delta, who chooses to dodge. He uses his second short skill to shoot his Spitfire at the Delta. I fail my dodge, he crits twice and makes 2 normal hits, meaning I've got to now make 6 saves, which is insane. And of course I fail enough of those to go very, very dead, so the Delta is off the table. For his next order, he moves the camo token, as his first short skill moves it up. Faces no AROs, so for the second short skill decides to move again. For his next order, activates the camo token again. For his first short skill, moves up. Faces an ARO from Hippo, who chooses to delay, which is obviously valid against a camo token. And then for his second short skill, he decides to shoot Hippo with surprise shot, and reveals a Swiss Guard with HMG. Hippo then declares her ARO and chooses to dodge. Now she's dodging on a -3, thanks to the surprise shot. So mine is a success, but he gets 1 hit. So I now have to make a save with Hippo. And it is good. Hippo may have died once, but apparently she's not up for dying twice. The next order activates the Swiss Guard. First short skill moves across. ARO, Hippo activates and she chooses to dodge. He decides to shoot with the second short skill. He hits Hippo twice, but Hippo saves them both. She is invincible. That's the end of round 2. Going into the final round, round 3, it's my turn to start with. I've actually only lost 2 models, thanks to reviving Hippo and her being bulletproof in that middle round. So I am very lucky that I have 8 orders to use. For my first order, I activate the Epsilon. With my first short skill, decides to move forward, faces no AROs, so moves forward again, just in an attempt to get into a scoring zone. And as that move finishes, the Epsilon goes prone. Yes, that means that it won't be able to ARO, but it means it also can't be killed and shot off the scoring zone. In hindsight, I don't think that was sensible. I should have probably left the Epsilon up to shoot him as he tried to get into scoring zones, but everything's 20/20 in hindsight. For my second order, I move the second Epsilon. For the first short skill, move forwards to get line of sight. The ARO from the Swiss Guard chooses to shoot. We're both on straights, as my second short skill is for me to shoot at the Swiss Guard. He successfully hits me. I have a save to make versus 15 damage, which I fail, and so my Epsilon goes unconscious. A terrible result in ARO. For my third order, I activate Hippolyta. My first short skill, she moves up. In terms of ARO, there's a Swiss Guard who chooses to shoot back. And then for my second short skill, Hippo decides to shoot. I'm on -6, he's on -3. I hit with the AP Breaker combi, and he doesn't get higher than me, so that goes through. And so he is saving on half of his BTS. He's looking for 7s, he fails, so takes a wound. Sadly, not enough to go unconscious because it is a multi-wound model, but that is a start. Then I use my Lieutenant order to activate the Gamma. For the first short skill, decides to move up, faces no AROs, so for the second short skill, moves up again. This is very much in an attempt to get my highest point model into a contested scoring zone, which will be the middle section. For my fourth regular order, I activate the Gamma. For my first short skill, I move up. As an ARO, the Swiss Guard activates and declares a shoot. For the second short skill, my Gamma decides to shoot back at the Swiss Guard using the Fauerbach. I'm suffering -9, he's on straights. This is a terrible move on paper. But luckily, I get a crit. He goes to save. He has a cocked dice, so rolls them again. And unfortunately for him, he fails the saves. So the Swiss Guard goes unconscious, which is a great result for me, especially as the odds were not in my favour. Then for my fifth regular order, I activate Hippolyta. For the first short skill, move up. Faces no AROs, so for her second short skill, she moves up again. Sixth order, activate Hippolyta. First short skill, move up. Faces no AROs, so second short skill moves up again. Again, looking to contest that middle zone. This is my last turn, so I'm basically trying to get into positions to hold him back and get that middle zone. I activate the Peeler Copperbot. For my first short skill, I move up. Face no AROs, so my second short skill, I move up again. Again, in an attempt to have that total reaction HMG, somewhere where I might be able to shoot some stuff. Then it's the PanO turn. For his first order, he activates the Aguila. For his first short skill, moves up. There are no AROs, so for his second short skill, moves again. For his second order, activates the Aguila again. First short skill moves up. Gets an ARO from the Gamma. It was his intention to move so he could see the Gamma. The Gamma decides to dodge, and for his second short skill, the Aguila decides to shoot at the Gamma. I'm dodging on 14s. He is shooting on 18s. My roll is sadly too high. He rolls 3 AP hits. I'm looking for 11 pluses on my save. I fail. The Gamma dies, and that is my big points gone. He then uses his Lieutenant order to activate the Knight of Justice. His first short skill moves, faces no AROs, so second short skill moves up again. For his third order, he activates the Knight of Justice again, moves with his first short skill. The ARO gets from the Peeler HMG total reaction. For his second short skill, he decides to shoot. We're both on straights. Mine is an 11 versus his 14s. 3 of his dice beat mine, which means I've then got to make saves, and the Peeler is very much gonzo. Then for his fourth and final order, he activates the Knight of Justice again. With his first short skill, he moves up. ARO is just Hippo because he's in the zone of control, but Hippo decides to do nothing because she's happy with the position that she is in. And then for a second short skill, the Knight of Justice moves up to get into the scoring zone. That is the end of the game. So in terms of contested areas, I have the Gangbuster in his farthest zone, but his points in that zone far outweigh the Gangbuster, so he controls his near zone and gets 1 point for that. I have Hippolyta in the middle, but the Knight of Justice we determined to be just inside. So sadly, Hippolyta is only 3 points, I believe, and he has 7.5 in the middle, including his camo token. So he gets that middle. So he is on 4 points, 1 point for having more points in his zone, 3 points for having more points in the middle zone. I have more points in my closest zone, so I get 1 point for that. And obviously I got my secret objective with my data scan, so I'm on 2. So sadly I lose the game 2-4, and it pretty much came down to him killing my gamma, because that's 5.5 points, I believe, or 5 points. So had I managed to have the gamma still alive, that would have taken me up to 8 points, which would have beaten his 7.5 in the middle, and I would have won the game. And that's one thing I find fascinating with Infinity. It can be one thing swings the game from looking like you basically got whooped to it actually being a really close game, or for you to look like you did the whooping. So like that, had my gamma have made some saves, kind of like Hippolyta was an absolute beast of doing, then very different story. I could have come away with a win in there, but didn't. And obviously that is the way the cookie crumbles. So very close game, 2 versus 4. I'm quite happy with that. It's not bad. I did make a couple of mistakes. So the Gangbuster I probably shouldn't have put into the farther zone. I should have put that in the middle to try and contest that slightly better. The Gangbuster's only 2 points, so that would have only put me on 5, which still would have put me too low to have actually contested anything. I should have not dropped my Epsilon prone. I probably would have held my closest zone anyway, although actually now that I think about it, I think the Epsilon was the only thing in my zone to own that. So actually, had I have lost the Epsilon, I wouldn't have got the 1 point for owning my nearest objective. So that would have been a risky move, actually leaving it upright to try and shoot in ARO, but may have been worthwhile. I had so many orders going into that final turn that I'm really surprised that I couldn't win it. I definitely had the orders to move stuff around the place, but it's amazing how quickly those orders disappear when you're trying to kill stuff that won't die, and when you're trying to move a few models into a scoring zone. So pretty tricky. I'm very happy that it was only a 2-4. Yep, not bad result. Very much enjoyed that game. Did you enjoy it? Do you have any suggestions for how I could have played things differently? Any recommendations you would have made for improvements? If you'd have been in the same situation as me, what would you have done differently? Very happy to hear your opinions and your thoughts. Obviously, I've tried to be open and honest about what we know we got wrong in that game, like especially those dodges triggering those mines. If you noticed anything else, please jump into the comments so that other people can potentially learn from my mistakes. I do appreciate that quite a few people use these battle reports to just learn how to play CodeOne, and also try and get their fix for gaming while various lockdowns are on around the country. So my heart goes out to you if you are in lockdown. Obviously stay safe. We're very lucky here in New Zealand that we are relatively well off in this case, and we can play games and we can do all that. We actually have a tournament still planned in October, which looks like it's going to go ahead. And so a lot of my videos from now on are actually going to be a bit of a road to this, my first ever tournament for Infinity. So subscribe and stay tuned if you want to see how that goes. Obviously you can follow me on Instagram if you want to see painting updates, terrain updates, and pretty much anything else. And yeah, feel free to hit subscribe if you want to be notified about future battle reports and other videos. Thank you for checking out this channel, and I'll be back soon.